Hello, and welcome to the Empowerography Podcast. This is a platform created for women's voices to be heard and a place to share their stories, journeys, and successes with the world for the purpose of helping other women who might be on similar journeys. We are empowering women one episode at a time. I'm your host, Brad Walsh, so kick back, grab one of your favorite beverages, and enjoy the stories. If you're looking for jewelry that makes an impact on your self-care routine and your style, Empowerography would love to offer you a discount code to one of our exclusive partners, Quartz & Canary Jewelry and Wellness Company. Please use code EMPOWER15 to receive 15% off upon checkout at www.quartzandcanary.com. Quartz & Canary is truly the place where spirituality meets style. Hello there, Brad Walsh here, your host of the Empowerography Podcast. Today, my guest is Christy Laverty. She is a media coach and PR strategist based in Burlington, Ontario. How are you doing today, Christy?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. It's not too bad out today. It's kind of warm-ish, I guess, for January.
For January.
Yes.
We'll take it.
Yes, absolutely, because they say a polar vortex is coming our way, so.
Shh, don't say that.
I know. I said it out loud.
I'm not a big fan of the winter.
No, neither am I. I hate the winter.
I know. Yeah, and we usually have a, beach in our view at some point in the winter. That's not going to happen this year. So.
No, I don't think so. I just wanted to say thank you very much for taking the time to be here today and be part of the Empowerography community and be a guest on the podcast and share a bit about your story.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm joining great company.
Yes, there are some pretty incredible women for sure. So, Christy, as I mentioned, you're a media coach and PR strategist. You've worked as a journalist in some of Canada's largest newsrooms and now an entrepreneur yourself. How long have you been working as a media coach and PR strategist?
So full-time, I would say about 7 years.
Okay.
I did a little bit of sort of freelancing consulting before I left media full-time. Mm-hmm. So, but given my sort of years in media, I feel like I've been in the business for decades.
Yeah, you've never really left, right?
No, there's so much of it that's kind of crosses over, and really this is just kind of one side of the coin,
right?
Really, PR and journalists, I think, so much of the time really work together on stories, and if you're doing PR right, then you're really part of the whole landscape of media.
Yeah. So what prompted or inspired the jump into entrepreneurship from working in the news and media world?
Well, at the time when I was still working full time, I was starting to explore freelance writing. I was blogging in those early days, like back in 2007, 2008, early adopter to social media, and, really started to see how things were changing. And so I started to make that sort of transition in that freelance space. Started small with that sort of freelance writing, blogging, and then started to realize that when I was, at a blogging conference and people started to know what I did in my full-time life, they were questions like, well, how do I do that? I want to, I want to be interviewed by a reporter. I want to get featured, in a magazine. How do I do that? I don't have any friends in, media. And I started to realize that there's so much about what was happening inside newsrooms and sort of behind the camera, behind the microphone, that people just didn't understand about what went into making decisions, what went into finding stories, that it had become this huge secret, and realized that part of the reason why we were, as a producer, we were not getting stories that we needed, that, it was because people didn't know what we needed. We weren't being clear about it. And that was a big part of why I recognized the need. And so started to slowly share those bits first with people that I knew in my personal circle.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, you should start charging because, you know, people really need this and, you know, you have something of value. And that was an interesting transition for me because I'd only ever worked for somebody else. I'd never, you know, and I think in those early days of freelancing has always been part of journalism.
Yeah.
But it's funny, in those days, I never really thought of it as entrepreneurship.
Right.
Which I do now because you are working for yourself.
That's
and I think it was a slow transition to, oh, okay, yeah, this is a thing. And people outside my bubble don't know how to do this because most of the people that I knew how to do it because they were either in media themselves or they were in PR.
Yeah, they worked in those worlds.
Yeah. And so it seems silly to say it, but at the time, you know, I was so in my bubble of my industry that I didn't realize that it was a huge secret, that people really didn't understand how to, you know, reach out to journalists. And of course, it's so much easier now. Social media makes it so much easier.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think, you know, too, recognizing that there were PR people that, in terms of what I was doing in media, even they weren't doing it right in some of the techniques that they were using.
Right.
You know, you just go onto Twitter and type in #PR fail, and you'll see a constant thread of complaints and criticism of things that happen, you know, from PR, and primarily because, you know, if you're not really paying attention, if you don't really understand the news cycle or what's happening in a newsroom, then it gets tricky if you're not really paying attention, because you're reaching out and you're sharing things, connecting on stories that don't resonate, you're offering the wrong kind of stories, the wrong kind of content. So that was really where it was a bit of a slow burn to get to this. Oh, right. Okay. This is something that people need. And my sort of experience and expertise can really lend itself well. Yeah. And I was at a point too in sort of journalism, I was a bit burnt out. I'd been in media for like 20 years.
Right. Okay.
I had young kids. I was commuting. And for anyone who maybe doesn't know the GTA, commuting from Burlington to downtown Toronto.
Yeah, that's not fun.
And like 20 years ago, it wasn't that difficult to commute.
Yes, right.
5 years ago, 8 years ago, it got challenging. And it was just becoming hard. The hours were hard. I never really worked a 9 to 5. Right. You know, for a good portion of my career.
Well, that world usually is not a 9 to 5 type job anyways, so.
It's not. If you think about the news cycle, how many stations are 24 hours a day?
Yeah, and exactly.
When they're broadcasting 24 hours a day, it means that somebody's actually working there. Yeah, right? Sure. There are people at 3:00 in the morning.
That's right.
So I worked weekends. I worked nights. I worked overnights. So much of my career in news, probably at least half, more than 10 years, I worked something other than 9 to 5. Well, actually, I would say all 20 years I worked something other than 9 to 5. But, you know, I worked weekends. You know, for much of my career, Mondays and Tuesdays were my days off. You know, and then having kids, you know, having a very non-traditional working shift makes it really, really challenging. So there were many years. My last gig was working at 680 News, and I worked evenings. So I started at, 5:30, dinner time. So I was commuting I pick up kids from school, say hello, chat for a few minutes, and then get in the car at 4.
Right.
And so I wasn't home for dinner. I wasn't home for bedtimes. I'd get home at 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30. And, that's a real drain.
For sure. That's tough on family life.
Yeah, it was. And, so you do that over a number of years. And, before kids, it's easier because, you don't have to get up early.
Yes,
you don't have to do schools. And then when the kids came along, it got challenging because you're trying to do all of the things, be all of the people.
Yeah, for sure.
So recognizing that when I left that world, I hadn't realized how burnt out I was. And then, realizing, oh, okay, this is what regular sleep is like. Okay, this is what regular life is like. And I think
this is normalcy.
Yeah. It's like, wow, okay, this is, yeah, sure.
I could get used to this.
Yeah. And I think that, I would say that probably anyone who is an entrepreneur has had moments where you think, oh gosh, maybe I should just go back to that, regular paycheck, working for somebody else. And then, and I've had moments where I'm like, oh, because I think once a news person, always a news person. I'm,
right.
Really, I pay attention to the news a lot. And this will go into other parts of PR, but I think anybody who's an entrepreneur should also be paying attention to the news.
Yes.
But you start to realize that the entrepreneurship, while it has challenges, especially, with COVID, there are so many advantages.
Oh yeah.
To it. And, if you can stick with it, find good people in your circle to, sort of bounce ideas off of, have a solid sort of system of people, whether it's, somebody you go to all the time or, maybe it's a Facebook group or whatever it is. If you have people that can sort of say, no, just, calm down, focus, it'll all work out. And whether that's not doing what you're doing, but doing something else. I listened to the episodes with the Gigi sisters, and,
yes,
their story is a prime example of, challenges, just kind of trying things, pivoting.
Yeah, for sure.
The word of probably, I'd say the year, but it's probably
absolutely
of the next 5 years.
Yes,
maybe?
Probably. I think you're right, Christy. I think you're right. I was honestly getting tired of the word. Everywhere you turn, everyone's using the word pivot, and it's like, or
unprecedented.
Yeah. I don't know. Pivot was the one that really stuck in my craw for me, but it sums it up though. Everybody as entrepreneurs has had to pivot. We've had to. I mean, I myself, being a photographer, I had to pivot, and my pivot was to the podcast. I had no choice. I mean, I can't make a living right now as a photographer. I can't shoot. So I had to pivot and start the podcast. And so, the word gets annoying for sure, but it's a necessary word. I mean, how else are you going to say it?
I know that's the thing, other than, shift maybe, but I think it's, it's an interesting conversation because, so much of what's happened, we find moments in business and industries where there's been an innovation, and it's usually come from disruption.
Yes.
And I think, it's challenging when, maybe you've seen your business crumble and close, but for so much, when you think about what's happened in COVID, it is a huge disruption. And it's really, it's sort of broken open things in terms of seeing sort of inequalities and equities, but also seeing some of the sort of the cracks in our armor,
for sure,
in terms of businesses, in terms of systems, in terms of sort of how we shop, how we support entrepreneurs.
Everything has changed. Everything.
Yeah.
The world as we knew it.
And it's one of the things that, when I'm working with clients, that, last year I had a couple of clients who were hugely impacted by COVID. And some of the stories that we pitched were, before the word pivot was being overused, it was, we have businesses who are struggling already. And this was, within weeks of those, orders to stay at home and close up shop and, not go to work and work from home. And, it was an opportunity to highlight, to say, hey, you know what, you need to learn more about the businesses in your community. But when we talk about statistics, or when we talk about the, entrepreneurs, they're actually people, and people in your community. And, we have to really pay attention to the impact. And it was a good opportunity to pitch a story that was relevant, but also give entrepreneurs an opportunity to say, this is how it's impacting. And I don't work in a silo. And these are all the people that, maybe they have a franchise, or maybe they work on our team. And, we have to really understand the impact to people, because, this goes back to the idea of PR. It's stories that really surround our lives, the people in our lives, because we care about people. We care about those stories that impact people. And that's, really where you want to look. And it was a good opportunity for them to talk about their businesses and talk about the impact. Because we, I think in the news cycle, we kind of lose sight sometimes when we talk numbers, when we talk statistics, when we talk big, about the systems and how, those benefits and serve and all that kind of stuff. Talking to people really brings it down to reality, but gives some context to how these bigger issues affect people.
For sure. Now, do you miss that world at all, working in the newsroom? And what did you love most about that world?
I do. There are times where there's a big story in the news, and, I feel the tug of covering that. And part of it's the adrenaline, the excitement of, taking a story, following it along, the execution of it. When I worked in media, a large part of my career was live news. I worked at CP24. I worked at CBC News Network. I worked at 680. So that's live, constant coverage. And so there's something really exciting about bringing something to air, executing on, an event, covering election night, the execution of that. There's a lot of adrenaline that goes into doing that, and the excitement. So I miss that part of it. I still, wake up, come down. The first channel that I put on the TV is always a news channel.
Of course.
It's just, after leaving news, I fought it for the first little while. And part of that, I think, is just that transition, right? You're like, okay, I want to be done with that. But always, I think once a news person, always a news person. It's just a bit in my DNA.
Right. It's just part of who you are.
Yeah. And there's lots of stuff that I don't miss. I don't miss the hours. I don't miss some of the more challenging stories. And I think it's one of the things that, people don't like about news, right? There's so much that is sad, and there's a lot of difficult news.
Yes.
And when you work in news, you can't turn it off, because you're working an 8-hour shift. When I worked, covered stories like 9/11, any conflicts, those get really challenging, because, day in, day out, you're covering stories that are really tragic and very emotional. So I don't miss that. I enjoy staying up to date, but also having the opportunity to say, you know what, I've had enough.
Just turn it off.
And just turn it off for a few days.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I don't miss those things about it. Yeah.
No, I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a media coach. Is this something that you kind of coined or created as a result of your background, or is this something that really was already out there and you just hopped on?
Yeah, it's something that is out there.
Okay.
There are a number of PR people who we'll do media coaching.
Okay.
And usually it tends to be people who have quite a lot of experience working with, either they've worked in a newsroom before, or, they work with clients and do exclusively, maybe they do only broadcast media, which I think is not always the best strategy. I like to kind of go across the board, but some of the work that I've done hasn't been sort of, pitching for people. It's, they want to do it themselves, but they need a little help kind of understanding how newsrooms work,
right?
Finessing some of their delivery. And I always say, don't do as I do as I say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the best, I never profess to be the best at delivering an interview,
right?
But my years of producing, it allows me to be a little bit more experienced in listening to and understanding what is a good interview.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's, identifying things that we do that we don't know that we do. So
right.
When I have, a coaching session, it's usually paying attention to some of the isms. I say all of our mannerisms.
Yeah.
I'm aware of my mannerisms. I say like and a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And those are my connectors. When I'm
right.
thinking about what to say, that's what I tend to fall back on.
Okay.
We all have them.
Yes.
So a lot of times it's me, doing a session, whether it's over the phone or whether it's on video. And I like to do those sessions depending on if you're doing an on-air interview on TV,
mm-hmm.
I'm saying, let's do a video chat so I can see what you do. Are you a hand talker? Do you, look away?
Yeah.
Especially now with Zoom calls, people find it really difficult. Like, do I look in the camera? Do I look at the screen? Like, where do I look? What do I do with my hands? So that's a big part of the coaching part is, helping them with what I would say is their performance, doing an interview, because part of it is not just how you speak, so what you say, it's the content. Are you delivering the right message? For example, a lot of times when, we do interviews about our business, we actually forget to say our business name.
Yeah. Because
we're talking to somebody who, in our minds, we are like, okay, well, that person knows who they're talking to. They know what my business is. And so we forget sometimes that I should say, Christy Laverty Communications, or, whatever that is when you're talking to a broadcaster on TV, that you should say what your business name is. So instead of saying, when we work, you should say your company name.
Yeah.
And it's not about being so overt that you say it every sentence, but
shameless plugs.
Right. But that's part of why people struggle with it, is because you're like, well, I don't want to be so salesy, but thinking of it more from that, I want to be of service. So if somebody's listening to an interview and, they don't see the beginning of a TV interview where they put that little name super on the TV to say, that, you're talking to me, put my name and company. Well, maybe they tune in midway, and so the information isn't there. So the coaching part is just making people aware of some of the things that a viewer would be considering, but also what a journalist, a producer, a reporter would be thinking. Because so much of my professional life was doing just that. When you work in media, especially in broadcast, you're thinking about, how does it look for the viewer? How does it look to, or how does it sound to the audience if you're in radio? And making sure that your people are asking the right questions, but that you've done enough to prepare the person who's doing the interview to be able to deliver the kind of information that's going to be best of use to the audience. So that's where that coaching part comes in.
Okay. All right. What excites or inspires or lights you up the most about what you do?
I think when I'm, the thing that I like to do the most is the talking to clients and really talking them through to a point where they get excited about sharing their business and sharing their expertise with a bigger audience. Because I think the idea of, doing interviews feels overwhelming to a lot of people. for so many people, they, when it comes to their business, they want to be, it's like, oh, I want to be featured. I want to be on, a big show. I want to be on a morning show. But the actual act of doing it can feel overwhelming. And I love that point where you prep somebody, we talk through it, and they're excited and they're pumped.
Yeah.
And then they do the interview, and you touch base, and they're like, that was amazing. Oh, it was so great. Oh, that reporter was so great. Oh, they were so friendly. And they kind of, get over the hump of the nervousness, and feel excited about more people learning about what it is that they do and how they help people. And also talking with entrepreneurs who maybe don't have a lot of PR experience, or they have none. And, talking with them about the potential and see the potential of what could happen. That's exciting, because for so many, especially women, they feel nervous and overwhelmed. A lot of the women that I've talked with over the years, unsure of their sort of entrepreneurship value.
Right.
And, that happens a lot, I think, when you're a solo entrepreneur. And, I hear a lot of, well, I'm just one person. Well, I'm only, one person. I just sell, scarves, or
they downplay it.
Yeah, like the just and only are things that crop into conversation. And, we don't often realize that we're even doing it.
Yeah,
and
very true.
When I talk with people, I'm like, oh, wait a second, just and only, those are words that you should eliminate in that context, because, when I was a producer and there was a story that we were covering, or somebody pitched me something that I liked, I never said, oh, unless it was relevant to the story. I didn't ask, well, how many employees do you have?
Yeah.
It just wasn't something that I talked about. Obviously, if you're pitching a story of how to manage 500 employees and you only have 2, then it's relevant. But
yes, absolutely.
It isn't necessarily something that they're going to ask about, because they're interested in the story that you've pitched. They're interested in your expertise, your opinion, or perspective on a story, or, something that's happening. And that's what matters, not the size of your business, unless it's relevant to the story that you've pitched.
Right.
Because I think we get caught up in, well, we're not the size of Coca-Cola. Why would anyone want to talk to me? And, we forget that we all have unique perspectives.
That's
right. We all have, if you're an entrepreneur, you have a story of entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Wherever you are in the journey, whether it's, 20 years or 2 months, and those are stories worth telling of, how many people during COVID, have lost their traditional jobs. And maybe that's what sparked your entrepreneurship journey, because you saw, because of what happened with COVID, that there was, a hole in a certain industry.
And other people out there can benefit from that story.
Yeah, it's really important. And, it's also part of understanding, well, does that fit with, a story on Entertainment Tonight? No, but does it fit with a podcast on entrepreneurship, or does it fit with, a story that a reporter might be covering for CBC Business or BNN Bloomberg? Yeah, because we know the statistics when it comes to jobs and how many people have been impacted. So to hear a story about how somebody maybe was, laid off, or the business they worked for closed, and so they, decided that that was an opportunity for them to fill a hole in the marketplace with their product or their service. And so those are worthy stories, because it also helps, the narrative of COVID and the economy. We know, and this comes back to the importance of paying attention to the news.
Yeah.
We know that women have been bearing the brunt of COVID and the impact on the economy. Women have been sort of forced out of jobs and held back from re-entering the job market more than men. They're bearing quite a bit of the brunt in terms of kids at home, financial impact, the job impact, and also, within the past week, surveys on mental health. Women are responding to those surveys with greater impacted mental health. So those are important stories
for sure
that when you pay attention to what's happening in the news, that we want to hear personal stories to give context to those statistics. So that's an opportunity if you've got a story. If you're a woman in entrepreneurship, if you're a woman who's at home, or if you're a man who, is seeing the impact, is stepping up, is changing how you're maybe running your business or leading a team because of what you're seeing. Those are really important stories to share and give context.
Very true. Very true. Christy, what do you think your unique skill set or superpower is that's helped you become successful?
That's a tough one. I think I pay attention a lot, and I'm really interested in hearing people's stories. So I think when I'm working with clients, I really love understanding their business and really talking about what they do and how they help people. I think is one of the things that drew me to journalism in the first place. And it's one of the things that keeps me going when I'm helping entrepreneurs. I just really love that idea of, it's sort of like what you're doing with the podcast, just talking to people and finding out what they do and how they help people. Asking questions and really listening. And there's so many awesome things out there, so many people doing amazing work.
There's so many amazing people out there.
Yeah. And it's just like, wow, I never knew that was a thing.
Yeah.
And I love that part where you're like, wow, okay. I think back to a woman I chatted with, and she sells scarves. And on the surface you go, oh, okay. But it all was prompted by trips. And of course, this is, as the Gigi sisters also say, BC, before COVID, where she traveled to Indonesia and met, people who were hand dyeing fabrics, and she was in a market. And, this idea that the scarves that she sells are from people who make them. And so she imports them. And there's a story about the scarves that she sells because they come from certain towns and cities. And, you think, oh, okay, that's interesting because, I've traveled before, but I've never really thought about, making that a business. And I find stories like that so intriguing because, when you get down to why, what's your why? Why would you start a business doing that? Yeah. And then you hear that, oh, that was interesting. She met these craftspeople and the story of how they hand dye. And there just is so many interesting aspects to, how people get to entrepreneurship or why they start businesses. But even, when they're not entrepreneurs, people who are, working with, vulnerable communities, doing volunteer work. It's so interesting to hear because people have stories that they don't often share until you kind of prod them.
That's right.
And so I think that's probably a superpower, that curiosity that I have to be always learning more.
Yeah. So speaking of success, how do you define success? What does that word mean to you?
I think it has to do with kind of living, not really living your, I guess, living your best life, but whatever that means to you. Because I think for everyone, it's different. At the time when I was working in media, that was success at the time. I'd done what I had wanted to do. I went to school and I was, doing the thing that I had learned to do. And now I'm at a different sort of time or season in my life. And so success means something different now. It means, being a bit more flexible, having more time with family, not sort of feeling like I'm running ragged. And, like if I need to sleep in on a day, I can.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean money or status. I think it just is having the ability to, make choices that suit the sort of season time of my life. Okay. And so for me, I think I'm at a point where I feel successful because I'm able to help people. I still make money. We still have a roof over our head, but I'm able to take time with my kids, help my dad who's in his 80s if he needs to, because I don't have to punch a clock. I can just say, oh, okay, I don't have meetings for the next couple of hours. I need to go and deal with, something for him or whatever. Right. And I think for me, that is a successful life, because I think success really should be more than just what you do
for sure
to earn a paycheck.
Absolutely. To date, what would you say is your biggest high or your greatest win?
In the PR entrepreneurship, probably there's been two opportunities. Well, I would say three. I'm going to say three, because I was working with a client with another PR person, and it's a company that manufactures work boots. And that was tricky, because getting media mentions for a work boot company is challenging. And we were able to get them some coverage in the Canadian press, which is big. And it was a really great opportunity to share a success story of manufacturing, which seems on the surface dry, but it was a real chance to share a success story of a company that was reinvesting in Canadians. So that was really sort of professional success, because I saw the value in the story, and it was really an important story to tell, but a hard one to sell in terms of PR. And another one was two clients during COVID that we got big coverage, one in the Canadian press and one in BNN, Bloomberg, that got picked up. And successes because they were both interesting stories. One was really talking about the impact early on. Jennifer Hargraves runs a company called Talent that helps women find flexible work that works for them. And it was really an important story to tell, because we were seeing the trends so early on. And, women talking to women online about the struggle, early on, it was like, oh, kids are home. That was like back in March. And, not knowing what they were going to do. So many women who had been in running their own companies, leadership, corporate world, saying, can't do this. I have to step back to help my family. And telling that story was really, really important, because early on you could see in the circle of women talking that women were already, starting to sort of crack. and it's hard to believe that we're now almost a year in. And, so many are still struggling. So that was a professional success for me, just to make sure, because it was an opportunity. A reporter had been telling the story about the job stats, and things were looking really miserable for women. And, reaching out to say, hey, I think we're missing a really big component of this. And this is what we're hearing. And nobody's talking about it. And, he saw the value in it and, recognized, yeah, you guys are onto something. And that was really early on. And, the other thing is, just probably in personal life is just to, be able to sort of be here for my kids are teenagers, and, being able to sort of be here and sort of help them through tricky times. So that's, something big too.
Mm-hmm, for sure. What would you say is one of the most important things you've learned in your life? And what was your life like before learning it? Or what was your life like after learning it?
I think it was probably a mental shift when I had kids. So I had worked already many, many years in news. And I think before kids, things like work, you stress about, making sure that the show is really great. And when things don't go that well, when something happens, it was big. It was like, crisis level. And when I had my first daughter, you sort of realize, okay, well, that's not that big a deal, because you get another chance next half hour to fix it. When you realize, I think things sort of were put in perspective, like, oh, okay, this is like, now I'm responsible for a person.
Yeah, a little human being.
like, this is big. This is serious. Like, big mistakes have big consequences when you're dealing with the lives of people. A newscast where, something, the wrong tape runs. I'm dating myself the minute I say tape. Because nobody does tape anymore.
That's right. It's all digital.
Yeah. But like when the wrong visuals run, and people, before kids, it was like a big deal. You'd get worked up, and I think my whole perspective, my whole approach to other people, especially then working in news, because news is high pressure. There's a lot of competition, competition in the newsroom itself, but also competition in the media landscape to be first, to be best. It really, everything kind of was put into perspective. Like, okay, it's not that big a deal. Like, we have a chance to fix it next time. It's not about perfection. You do the best you can. And then if, you need to, level up, you do. But that was probably the big thing. So my oldest daughter she'll be 18 this spring. So that was the shift.
Yeah, for sure.
Like 18 years ago. Oddly enough, that was back in the SARS days.
Right.
Yeah.
Too funny. Wow.
I know. But it does. It just puts everything into perspective, because it's like, I think kids softened me, but also put things into perspective. Like, yeah, you want to do your best, but is somebody going to die because we didn't run the right story? Nope. No. We'll just get it right the next time.
That's it. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. And I think one of again, thinking about disruption, what I think has been a nice sort of side effect of how we're all living with COVID is that I think we've all gotten to be a little bit more understanding. You see reporters on TV, doing news hits and their cats walk in front. We're all doing Zoom calls with kids, popping their heads into camera, dogs barking in the background, where, I think before COVID, we were all so worried about being perfect and making sure that people didn't, see those life things. And now we're all a little bit more understanding and I think tolerant of, we all have lives. Some of us have kids, some of us have pets, some of us, maybe have laundry in the corner on a Zoom call. Like it's a bit of a nice, I feel, side effect of, we're all human. And it doesn't need to be perfect. And nobody's perfect.
That's right. There's no such thing as perfect.
No.
What would you say is one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received?
That's a tough one. I think it's maybe not so much advice, but a bit of a life lesson. It probably comes from my mother. My sister was hit by a car when we were all very young. She was 5. I was 8. Yeah, I was 8. She survived. But, one of the things that I learned from my mom is so often when you tell the story, there's that whole part of the, people will think, oh, why me when there's a tragedy?
Yes.
And I remember my mom telling me the story when my sister was in the hospital, and she was talking with another parent. And, they said, oh, gosh, you must think, oh, why me? Why me? And my mother said, why not me? It's a strange thing, but she said, it's not, I'm not special. None of us are immune to the tragedies of life. If you don't experience a tragedy, then you're a lucky person. But, she said, you can't spend your time wallowing in the why me. She said, we didn't have time for that. And, it can really keep you stuck in the moment. And she said, why not me? She said, things happen and you have to learn to accept and move on and make the best life possible for yourself and your family. And so I think that was a big life lesson.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to spend a few moments thinking, oh, this really sucks.
Yeah.
But none of us are immune, and you really have to
the key is just to not stay down in that.
Yeah. And, like she had always said, you have your moments. But, spending time thinking, why me? Why me? It's just, it doesn't change anything. And she said, it's difficult, but you only get one shot at it, right? You only get one life. And,
yes,
we all have our things. And so that was probably the biggest life lesson. I think about that a lot.
No doubt.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you feel inspired or like your best self?
I think having the opportunity to sort of show my kids that you don't have to necessarily pick, a 9-to-5 job. You don't have to conform. Our house is pretty unusual, I think, in terms of jobs. I worked in media for so long, and now I do PR. And, there aren't a lot of people. The media world is pretty small. You rarely come across somebody, if you're out, again, before COVID at a party, where you'll find somebody that says, hey, I'm a news producer, right?
Yeah.
So I think I've had an opportunity to work in a job that is pretty unique, pretty exciting. But on the flip side of that, my husband has an even more exciting job, and he draws comic books for a living. So
wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so I think, what inspires me is, being able to create opportunities and a life where it shows our kids that, you don't have to just play it safe. You can take the things that you're really good at and make a career out of them, whether that's, for me, it was, writing and that curiosity, like seeking out stories. Well, that's what journalists do. And that's really kind of what I do now with PR, right? I'm still seeking out stories and helping tell stories. And that is really exciting. And that kind of inspires me that, when we talk about stuff around the dinner table, because we're one of those families that still eats at the table with our kids. And, we're able to have really lively conversations so that we can, help them sort of set themselves up for whatever life that they want. And it's exciting to hear them talk when, a teacher will say to somebody, well, I know you want to be, her friend wants to go into, I think, medicine. And it's, well, there's not too many kids who, can do that. It's really challenging. And, my kids are the first ones to kind of pipe up and say, what are you talking about? Of course she can do it if she wants to do it. And that's really exciting because they see that, their dad draws comic books for a living and has taken his, art, the things that he has always loved to do and has made a living. And I've taken the things that I like to do, writing, curiosity, asking questions, and have turned that into, a career. So that is kind of what, kind of keeps me going and keeps me inspired to see that and show the potential. But also, when, clients come to me and when I, can talk to somebody and have them at the end of the conversation saying, yeah, right. Of course, my story is worth telling. Yeah, I should tell more people. That's exciting.
For sure. If you were writing your autobiography, what would the title be?
Oh, I'm not so great with headlines and titles. It's the thing that I always do last. Oh my gosh. That's a tough one. A work in progress.
Oh, there we go. That works. I like it.
I think because, I think it's one of the things that we actually talk a lot about in our house is I think we're all ambitious people, that there's always ideas. There's lots of things that I want to do, write books, interviews, it's a work in progress. I think the minute you say that you're no longer a work in progress, then, sort of things become stale. As long as you still have ideas and things that you want to do, some things will work out. Some will be big successes. Some won't. Some will lead you to the next thing.
Yep.
I think if you're always, looking to do something new, something different, we're all a work in progress.
What would you say is one of your favorite quotes?
There's a quote from a movie called Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. Mm-hmm. Dustin Hoffman. Life is an occasion, rise to it.
I love it.
And, I think that that's something that we should remind ourselves often. For sure. And the other one is something Mike Dooley, he's kind of a mindset guy. He has written lots of books. This idea of thoughts become things. I think when we think things, even big things, it's part of that idea of sort of dreaming, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Manifestation.
Yeah.
And putting it out there.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to put it out there.
Yeah.
And it seems silly, but you just never know when you put things out there and share with people, who's going to be in a position to say, hey, you know what? I know somebody who is looking for this, or, hey, I know somebody who I think could help you. Mm-hmm. And that's really, that thoughts become things when you put it out to the universe.
That's right. The universe is always listening.
Yeah. And you just never know. And, really there's so many people out there that want to help. Mm-hmm. So, putting things out there to the universe is big.
For sure. What is your personal motto, Christy?
I think probably always be curious and be learning. Like learning is a big part of what I have done always. Staying curious, whether it's, you're reading, listening to podcasts, it allows you to learn, expand your perspective, change the way you think about things. So be curious and always be learning.
Okay. What's the most recent investment you've made in yourself?
Probably a simple thing, but audiobooks. I'm currently listening to Barack Obama's book.
Okay.
Nothing big, but again, it's I don't find as much time to read these days.
Yeah.
So the audiobooks, I really started to listen to audiobooks when I was commuting.
Excellent.
And now, it's a good use of time. So now when I'm walking the dogs, I just, play an audiobook. So right now I'm listening to Barack Obama.
Very cool. Audiobooks are great. I love them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's nice to hear Barack Obama's voice. I have missed that the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to do a little bit of a rapid fire thing here. So the next series of questions will just be 1, 2, 3 word answer.
Oh my goodness, okay? That's a challenge for a long talker like me.
How would you describe yourself in one word?
Ooh. A mother. I mother people.
What's the first thing you notice about a person?
Their smile.
Money or fame?
Money.
Early bird or night owl?
Oh, total night owl.
If you could teach the world one thing, what would it be?
To listen.
You are the second person today that has said that. And I was telling her as well that a friend of mine has this saying, and he says, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Yeah. Well, let's be honest. I think it, I'm a long talker, so sometimes listening is a challenge, but I think, the world would be a better place if we all took the time to listen. People share stories from their own perspectives and their own truths, right? Yep. It might not be your truth, but it's theirs.
That's right. What's one thing you want but cannot buy with money?
Time. More time.
What was your very
time
first...
with people.
Yeah, time is good. Time is the most valuable commodity in the world.
Yep.
What was your very first job?
Ooh, my very first job was Tim Hortons. I worked at Tim Hortons. How Canadian is that?
Yes, that's about as Canadian as it gets.
and then I worked for the Bay.
Oh, look at even
From
more so.
From Canadiana to Canadiana.
No kidding. Entrepreneur life is?
Hard but rewarding.
If I had an extra hour a day, I would.
That's a toss-up between spending time with family or sleeping.
Okay. My favorite way to unwind is?
Watching movies with the family.
The last book or podcast I listened to or read was?
Last podcast, I listened to episodes of your podcast.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear.
I'm not brown nosing, but I wanted to make sure that I could see who I was in company with. And book I read, physically read. Of course, as you know, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but actually probably the last book I read, I forget the title, but it was fiction written by, sorry, it's getting to the point of the day where there's lots of emails coming in. I don't know if you can hear it pinging.
No.
The last book was by my friend Karma Brown. It was fiction. I forget recipes. I forget what it was called, but Karma Brown writes good fiction.
Okay. That concludes our rapid fire section.
See, even the long talker, I couldn't keep it to one word. I can't. It's the long talker in me. Can't help it.
Christy, if you had a theme song that played every time you walked into a room, what song would that be?
It's probably one of my favorites. It's old school R&B by the Gap Band, and it's called Outstanding.
Okay. If you came with a warning label, what would yours say?
Has strong opinions.
What is one of your favorite entrepreneurial books?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough one. I've read quite a few.
Okay, give me your top 2.
You know what I like? The You're a Badass by
Jen Sincero.
Yeah, her whole series. I've read a couple of hers. I think she's got a new one out.
Yes, she does.
And I like them because, you know, there's a little bit of her personality and that idea that it's, you know, there's lessons to be learned. It's not perfection.
Yeah.
That series for sure.
Okay. If you could sit down and have a 1-hour conversation with anyone in the world, alive or dead, who would it be and why?
Ooh, I would say probably Michelle Obama. It would be a toss-up between her or Barack Obama.
Okay.
I just think, you know, they have so many interesting stories to share, perspectives. I think we probably understand a little bit more given the U.S. politics and climate now than understanding that there's probably some really great stories that they could share. But also, I think so many lessons about, you know, the journey, the challenges, how to rise above them, how to sort of keep going when things are really tough, and maybe where the road to success, whatever success means to you, aren't clear, but you just keep stepping. So that's why.
If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Don't stress. It'll all work out.
Plain and simple. I love it.
Plain and simple. Don't stress.
Lastly, if you were to deliver your last 30-second speech to the world, what would that last 30 seconds sound like?
Don't stress. It'll all work out. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Done is better than perfect. And I think the idea of waiting for perfection, waiting for things to be just right. You know, we say things like, "Oh, when I have more money, I'll have a bigger house. When I, you know, when I have more money in the bank, that's when we'll start having kids. Or when I'm ready." I mean, when are you ever ready? You're never going to be ready. Just do it.
That's right. That's right.
You'll figure it out. You're smarter than you think you are. You'll figure it out. And if you don't know, ask somebody.
Okay. Awesome. Very wise words. Sage advice. Christy, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and share a bit about your story and your journey and be part of the Empowerography community. I appreciate you. And I just want to say thank you for being part of this and helping to grow the community by sharing your story.
Well, thanks for having this long talker on your podcast.
The pleasure was all mine, Christy. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
My name is Brad Walsh, host of your Empowerography podcast. Today, my guest has been Christy Laverty. She is a media coach and PR strategist based in Burlington, Ontario. Thank you once again, Christy. I hope you have an amazing rest of the day.
You too.
Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't yet, please be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share with all your friends. You can find me at viseuphoria.ca and follow me on Instagram at Empowerography Podcast and on Facebook at Empowerography. Please join me next time for another inspirational story from yet another amazing woman.